I'm excited for college football tomorrow.
Oh, that's right. The season started already, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think I saw it kicked off yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, even. So, yeah, it's crazy. Time just keeps like turning and turning and turning, you know?
All right, everybody, we're going live here. So, hello and welcome to our VAC roundtable. We're up to number 92, and we're joined tonight with another special guest. It is Mr. Mike Lomuto from the Minority Cannabis Business Association. And we know that they have a lot going on, and we wanted to take this opportunity to kind of check in with him and his history to see what is happening, as well as kind of get an update from his history. He's been around for a little bit, and of course, his history is interwoven into the cannabis history. So, with that in mind, we're going to jump right into it. So, thank you once again, Mike, for joining us tonight. And our first question is kind of a multi-tiered question, and that is, how did you originally come to cannabis? Now, this is the multi-level in the sense such as when did you first hear about it? When did you first get turned on? And then when did you decide it was going to be your life's work?
I don't know if I've still decided it's my life's work, you know what I mean? But no, I mean it definitely has been that way for a long time. It's just interesting to think of it in those terms, but it does make sense. So for me, when I was first introduced to it, I was young as a kid. I found out that my dad smoked, and he did so, primarily medicinally. I mean, I think that, depending on how you look at things, you could say that everybody's medicating. But for him, it was very specific for pain management and appetite and things like that. And he also taught me at an early age that yes, it's also used, for what we call recreational nowadays, which is a lot of times what we call self-medicating as well. So, from the time I was young, I knew what it was, I knew what the plant was, I knew what it smelled like when he would go outside and smoke. And I understood that it wasn't, it wasn't the vilified thing that we were learning in the DARE program, at the same time. So that would be the beginning of it. My own experiences started probably in high school, and I just fell in love with the plant, and I wasn't a big fan of a lot of school stuff. So but I was a big fan of learning and a big fan of studying and a big fan of just like finding out about everything I could. And I think at that age, cannabis really just helped open my eyes up in a lot of different ways. It helped open me up in different ways. I do wish, looking back, that yeah, it was more structured. And I'm not advocating that we have high schoolers using the plant at this point in time. But I am saying that, going back, I think it had a lot of positive impact. And I also wish it was more structured, and maybe I could have focused it more to be able to really use it in ways that I see people now starting to utilize as we see microdosing and we see different types of cannabinoids being out there. And so, in the last 15 years or whatever it is now, I think the relationship with the plant has shifted so much now for me personally. Just seeing all the different potential that's out there. I think that a lot of us knew that it was a very powerful plant, but again, over the last several years, being privileged enough now to see some of the different ways has been amazing. And I keep looking back, I know I'm kind of running in a different direction from your question exactly, but it's been interesting lately because the last few months, I keep thinking back on the last 40 years or whatever it is now, and thinking about like, what if legalization or regulation or taxation happened 30 years ago or 20 years ago or 40 years ago? Where would we be? And, like the with these cannabinoids and these new cannabinoids and with the stigma still being broken down, where are we going to be 30 years from now, 40 years from now, 20 years from now? So I don't know. That's kind of where my head goes with that question. So on a Friday afternoon, end of the day, and evening. I guess it's evening by now. So yeah.
Right on. Well, thank you very much for that. Next up will be Councilmember Mike Davis. Council.
Yeah. Hey, Mike. Thanks for joining us. So coming from San Francisco, how has your background and heritage shaped your perspective on building inclusive communities within the cannabis space?
Yeah, so that's like a 3 hour question probably. We can unpack that one for a while. First off, on my own end of things, so my heritage, I'm biracial, mixed, whatever you want to call it. My mom's from Thailand, my dad's Italian American, and so growing up, one of the things that I think I learned and continue to try to navigate is, not necessarily belonging to any specific group. Um, and growing up in San Francisco primarily, and I grew up originally first in suburban New York, where I always felt a little bit as an outsider completely, and especially with my mom and her heritage. But then in San Francisco, we moved there from middle school, high school to be in a place that was more diverse. I still felt on an island. And one of the things that helped me, again, go back to high school, not feel as much of an island was cannabis. Aside from the plant itself and consuming it, it was also the circles that we formed, the literal smoking circles and then the friendship circles. And those circles were always very, very diverse and inclusive of everybody, even people that didn't smoke. I know that, sometimes, certain groups can become more exclusive, but the reality that I experienced was that it was an extremely inclusive experience. Like everywhere we went, that people bust out like what you had and you share it and you check it out and you see like, compare and get high together basically at that age. It was very inclusive. And so and then also growing up in a city that was on the surface talks about progressivism, but also we saw was completely pushing out working class and minority families and immigrant families on a regular basis due to its practices with business and with rent and everything else. Seemed antithetical to what I was also being raised with, which was this idea of, inclusivity and diversity and equity and stuff, right? And before we use those terms specifically. And so as I've shaped my adult life into, advocating for the plant. And at first it was building a business in the space, and then it's been for the last several years now advocating, to make sure that the industry is set up, in an equitable fashion. I really just come back to that space. I come back to the space of feeling like, okay, like cannabis is supposed to be a thing that makes people not be on an island. It's supposed to be a thing that brings us all together, connects us, combines us, and how can we create industry that does the opposite, that's antithetical to the plant. If we're going to respect the plant and honor the plant and look at what the plant is teaching us, it's about inclusivity and it's about, creating structures and systems that reflect that. So the plant grows pretty much everywhere in every climate, every type of ecosystem in the world, really, and so do people. And so, we need to, as we move forward, and that's what I now do when I'm, putting together whatever we're doing at MCBA and other types of organizations that I collaborate with. It's always how do we make sure that we're respecting and reflecting the plant in an inclusive manner. So yeah, that's what I would say to that.
Right on. Thank you very much. Uh,
Absolutely.
Next up will be Councilmember Tony Landry.
Excuse me. Mike, it's a pleasure to meet you, and I love what you were saying about building community and inclusive. So important, especially in the cannabis industry or the psychedelic industry as the entheogenic plants come online. We want to make sure they don't get captured up by, corporations, and we have community use of them. So my question is, you've been a driving force in building equity initiatives within the cannabis industry. From your perspective, what does true equity look like? Who are the stakeholders and how close or far are we from achieving it?
So a lot to unpack there, right? I mean, how far are we from achieving it? I mean, we got a long way to go. I would say that the industry, the way it's being set up right now, and we just look, across the country, from state to state, in a lot of ways, it's been a more capitalized takeover, basically. As we create a regulated industry, those that are more capitalized, generally speaking, have more access to being able to create the opportunities. Um, the so in a lot of ways. So I've heard there's a few mentors I look to, and one of the things that they've talked about is that, the legacy space, the traditional space, does not have a diversity problem, does not have a problem with equity, right? But the regulated space definitely does. The regulated space is definitely not reflective of cannabis users. It's definitely not reflective of who's been put in jail for cannabis either. And so if we are, you know, looking at it through that lens, we got a long ways to go. And as far as where we're trying to get to, in my opinion, it's again, I point to, I think that everybody should have the opportunity, just like everybody should have the opportunity to be in that smoking circle, everybody should have the opportunity to participate in this industry. It doesn't necessarily mean every single person is going to go ahead and opening up the biggest manufacturing facility tomorrow. I get that. But there should be avenues and opportunities for everybody to be able to participate. And when we say everybody, we look at social equity programs and what they've tried to do, right, which is to make sure that there's a runway and a pathway on an on-ramp basically for folks that were arrested, incarcerated, right, like put in jail and had their life, periods of their life literally taken away from them because of the prohibition of this plant. If we don't create an industry that makes sure that the folks that have gone to that had that, extreme type of a circumstance, basically, um, then we're not creating something equitable, right? Like we need to make sure that the folks that who basically who this industry's backs were built on at some point in time, right, in some different fashion, are able to participate in this. The other thing I'll point out, is just look, we're in a country that definitely has a long history of racial inequities. It doesn't matter at what point in time you enter it into, there's definitely a lot of inequities. And so, we have to make sure as we build that different minority groups, different racially ethnic groups, basically Black groups, the Black community, the Afro-Latin community, right? That these groups are included in how we build out this industry, right? Not just as an afterthought, because as an afterthought, we know historically speaking, the afterthought's not going to be there. We're going to be way down the road. And you look at a state like Colorado, where they tried to come in afterwards and put this out there and try to create something equitable and social equity. It's been extremely challenging. There's some good people working on that for a lot of years now, but they try to do it after the fact. So I like to think about the fact that we're still in our nascency, if anything. If not, we're still even in the womb, until federal legalization and regulation happens. So we still have the opportunity to get this right. We still have the opportunity to make sure that all potential business owners are able to be included in this process. And so, I think we got a long ways to go, but I also think there's a lot of great people working on this. And, being able to have conversations like this with you all, I think it's really important you know, to create a lot of intersectionality with our veterans. There's a lot of veterans have been, really, I don't want to speak for veterans, but what I see is that a lot of veterans are kind of pushed aside and forgotten and also an afterthought, similar to what I was just saying. And so if we don't include different groups from the beginning, it's not going to happen. So anyway, hopefully that answers your question.
Yes. Next up will be Council Member Michael Crowitz. Council Member.
Thanks, ATN. It's great to have you here, Mike. Before I ask the question, I just want to talk about something for just a second. Veterans Action Council did kind of a deep dive, mostly, I think, to help me at the time. There was an effort in Virginia to pass a rather ambitious, legalization measure that was a two-part measure, and the second part never got passed. But in working on that, it had extensive conversations around equity and around sort of rehabilitation of communities and individuals after the drug war interaction of cannabis. And I don't know, I felt like we learned a lot, but also I feel like speaking here for a moment about things that aren't said very often, really. We've kind of gotten lost in the details, I think, as a movement, and have gotten really in each other's face about arguing over, very specific and finite terms of how to move forward. Let's look backwards for a second and realize that this is really kind of part of the dream of the cannabis movement. The cannabis movement was started essentially to, do two things: was to get people either out of jail or to prevent them from going to jail, and to allow people to have access to this plant, free, legal access, individually, to do with what you will. Make famous Amos cookies or create the next Walmart or whatever. From one end of the scale to the other. we didn't really care. I mean, I don't think the movement really cared about what you did with the cannabis as long as you had access to it and the access was free and unfettered. And I think we got into a point as a movement where we were trying to basically get past some really almost insurmountable obstacles put in our way. And one of the ways that we were able to do that was by realizing something we've been saying for a very long time, which was that cannabis is a good tax base, that actually you can make some money off of it. But inadvertently, what we created was kind of a monster of, a lot of folks looking at the prohibition price of cannabis and scaling up their mind based on the prohibition price of cannabis, which is like, basing a documentary on air. Um, so anyway, I just want to say that this is something that I think the cannabis movement has long. We didn't spend a lot of time getting people out of prison, but we always hoped that we would prevent people from going to prison. And we really, always felt like that was the blind spot of our movement. I can say that as a leader going over the years, that we've always felt that it was a blind spot in our movement, that we didn't do more for people that already were in jail. But if you want to change laws, you have to really focus on that. And it's a whole different project to work on getting people out of prison than it is to prevent people from going to prison. And one of them is, certainly a short-term project, and one's a long-term project. We went for the, kind of the long-term project and left the short-term project to others that never really fit the bill. I worked for a little while with November Coalition that tried to do that, but there haven't been very many organizations, and I lament that. And I guess it's a part apology and part thank you, and just part focusing in on some things that haven't been said enough about the value and the honor in what you're working on. So, having
No, I
said that,
appreciate that.
the question is, how has your work been affected by recent attacks, especially on DEI from our current executive branch and administration? It must be like really, I can't even imagine. That's why the question, really.
Yeah, look, DEI work uh, is always challenging, right? We're fighting. I don't want to say an uphill battle, but I mean that's what it definitely I think probably could be categorized as. Um, and I think that with this latest slew of attacks, so to speak, like you're saying, like the cutting of programs and the going after of people. I feel very mixed around a lot of this, right? I mean, the one thing I'm clear about is that this has definitely been destabilizing in a lot of ways, right? There's a lot of folks that have lost their funding. There's a lot of folks that have been concerned about losing their funding. There's a lot of people that still have their funding but know that they're on thin ice. We have a massive ecosystem and structure between businesses and government and foundations and all these different funding sources that already in cannabis are very tenuous to begin with, and we're not able to access, as you guys all know, all the same things that everybody else does in other traditional, so to speak, traditional industries. Um, Couple that with now the uncertainty that happens in the DEI space, it's been very destabilizing, and there's been a lot of challenges. I think one of the most important things there's a lot of people that just had to pull back. And when we're talking about movements, we're talking about a lot of volunteerism. And we're talking about, maybe some paid positions, but those paid positions are usually wearing 23 different hats. And so when you lose 23 different hats at an organization and you lose a few volunteers, and people are also a little bit more, you know, strained and stressed about all the different things going on and looking around at what's happening, it's destabilizing. And I think that's really been the biggest issue that I see. But at the same time, I look at destabilization as an opportunity to kind of re-envision and regain your ground and re-figure out, okay, looking at from, thinking about from a martial arts perspective, right? Like one of the forms I studied was like drunken style, right? I think Jackie Chan, I think was the one that had Drunken Master like a few years back. And the whole style was based on like learning as if you're already punch drunk, right? And so right now, I think a lot of us are coming into this year, a lot of us that have been doing this work have already been pretty much punch drunk. There's already been a lot of, well, we've taken a lot of blows already. I think this is when we lean into being able to fight in that drunken master style, right? And so it's really about, okay, having grace for the folks that are struggling to be able to figure out how to stay in the space in that way, making sure that we're providing support for each other on a personal level too, right? Because we have to remember that we're people in this movement as well, and we can't sacrifice our own selves and our own health and our own mental wellness, and we have to support each other in those things. And then also using it as an opportunity to regain our ground and regain our footing and say, okay, now how do I move forward? How do I keep battling? How do I keep figuring this out? But, you know, I would say that the biggest challenge that I see is obviously aside from the money being, drying up in different places, the destabilization that happens with that, with when you're building a movement, it's so important to be able to keep that clear vision. So I would say to anybody that's in that space and is in the space and is struggling with that, that this is the time to just take some breaths, get your feet on the ground and figure out how are we fighting next? Like, where's the next battle? Where's the next battle coming from? And how are we going to group up together? I talk a lot about collaboration because I really believe that in these moments we have to figure out how to get to back to be able to fight out from, against a bigger entity, so to speak, right? A bigger enemy, so to speak, right?
Absolutely. Always got to keep our eye on our enemies more so than our friends. Next up will be Councilmember Nate Landau. Councilmember Landau, you're recognized.
Hey, Mike. Hey, first of all, it's amazing to have you on here. We met in 2021, and it's always been good to see you. And I love the work that you do. And you're a true testament of someone that doesn't just talk about collaboration, but actually makes it happen. And I've been fortunate enough to participate in a bunch of your workshops. So I just want to give you good thanks from the bottom of my heart for what you do. It's really amazing. And the question is, through the equity workshop tour and policy Braintrust, you've connected with communities across the country. What common challenges have you seen that needs urgent attention, and what bright spots give you hope? Thank you.
So first off, Nate, thank you, man. It's been great to get to know you over these last few years. When we've needed to count on folks and say, hey, who can do this, who can do that, Nate, you've always come through, and you always what is it, under promise, over deliver. So I always appreciate that about you, man. It's important. I always say to people, look, like, as in all this volunteerism space, we may not be able to always do what we hope we can do. We always may have to step back at times. And that's okay. And people apologize to me all the time when that's the case. I'm like, hey, it's all good. Like, I get it. Like, we have to, there's an ebb and a flow to this. The main thing that I always talk about, though, is when you do say you're going to definitely do something, do it, and under promise but over deliver. And Nate, I just appreciate that you're always of that mindset of you under promise and over deliver. You always are solid. You say you're going to do something, you do it, and then some. And so I just really appreciate that. So appreciate you, man. And to everybody else out there that's struggles with that, right? Like, I hear this a lot. People struggle with like wanting to do more, wanting to give more. We just have to always remember it's like we have to still protect ourselves. We have to still be able to move forward ourselves. We have to eat. We have to take care of our families and our communities. And at the same time, like, okay, yeah, like, just be true to your word. So with that said, as far as the equity policy brain trust and the equity workshop tour, some of the immediate challenges and some of the things that inspire me, I'll start with what inspires me because that's really the easier thing, I think. The easier thing to say about what inspires me is the fact that people keep showing up. When I say showing up, I mean, yeah, physically at the workshops, but I mean showing up with intention and showing up with what they have to offer the space and what they have to contribute to conversations and resources and networks and introductions, right? Is that, I go from workshop to workshop. That's something that's common amongst everybody, right? And this is not just the day of, it's the planning that happens beforehand. It's the aftermath where people are still talking and texting. And then I find out, oh yeah, these guys have been talking for months now and started a side business together or like merge their business or whatever it may be, right? Things like that are very inspiring because it shows that even though there's a lot of challenges, and people definitely, like I said, have been feeling the challenges in this space. Um, there's still the drive and the passion and commitment to create something better and to champion this plant and to champion what this plant can do, which is, I believe, heal the world in a lot of ways. So that's really inspiring. I do see your hand up, Nate. And before I talk about the challenges, I guess, yeah, what do you got?
Ignore me, and then only after you're done, I'll ask the question.
Oh, okay, cool. As far as the challenge that I see needs immediate attention, I mean, I'll say the obvious thing is capital, access to capital, right? But it's beyond just access to capital, right? It's access to capital and it's also an understanding of how capital works, right? It's something that I'm still, a novice at, relatively speaking, right? I'm in a lot of rooms with a lot of people that have raised capital. I've heard the stories. I've talked with them about how they do it. I've picked their brains. I've listened to other people pick their brains. But I myself have not started a business that I got funded for millions of dollars, right? I've been an entrepreneur. It didn't work out in the ways that I wanted it to. And I have raised some money, but not like what I see people needing to do now in order to create these regulated cannabis industries spaces. And so, and I know, like I said, a tip of the iceberg, relatively speaking. But I think the average new cannabis entrepreneur knows like what I knew 10 years ago, which is very, very, very little. And, so there's a disconnect, one, between the access to capital in the first place, and then people understanding what they need to do to get to the limited capital that is there. So I think that, that's why we just did this 3-day event. And one day there was a lot of focus on raising capital. We had a whole mastermind of raising capital. There was, I think, 13 or 14 different mentors, many of whom who flew in, took their time to fly in. People like, Tony Forge, Naomi Granger, Amir Hunter, Jarrell Wall, Adrian Adams, folks from all over the country who have businesses that they're running and took time to come, and because they know that this is also an extremely important topic that we need to figure out how to create better channels to capital and access to it, and also help get people more prepared to be ready for that to happen, because it doesn't just happen in a vacuum, right? It has to happen from the each end to the other. So that's what I would say we need to figure out soon and fast, because if we don't, we're just going to keep falling behind. Because as license types come open and as people get their applications in, and they get the opportunity, but if they can't figure out how to get that capital path going, you know, and I'm not saying it has to always be VC, right? It very often isn't, but we have to figure out how do we gain access to that capital to really make this happen. So yeah, that's what I would say.
And your follow-up, Nate?
I just want to give a real world example of how his workshops helped me personally. Just before I took over the facility in San Francisco, I was at one of his events and I met a guy there that I became his mentor, and he introduced us to our co-packer. And that was just, a very organic thing. So, when Mike at his event, he's always like, be intentional, be actionable. And that was the thing I'm very grateful for him facilitating.
Thank you. Thank you. And that's to dig into that a little further. Thank you, Nate, for that prompt there. Is when I said what inspires me is the way people show up and continue to show up. That right there is the intentionality. Like the fact that people, like we go over SMART goals. We make sure that when people leave, there's specific action items they've written down that day, right? Now, sometimes, of course, not everybody writes that down, but most people write it down, and then even the ones that don't, like I talk to them later, and they followed up on the things that they said they're going to follow up on, because we hold each other accountable in that way. And following up on those actionable items, those SMART goals, like this is how we move forward. It's so rudimentary at the end of the day, but at the end of the day, it's a rudimentary thing that really drives us forward. And so I get inspired when I see and I hear people tell me about SMART goals that they literally knocked down as a result of coming to our workshops. So yeah, thank you for that opportunity.
Right on. Next up will be Council Member Marilyn Mathery. Council Member.
Hi, Mike. Nice to meet you virtually. Yeah, and boy, the secrets of how to raise money. Yeah, I wish I knew that as well. It's pretty tough. I just do education on cannabis. Question that I have for you is, if you could implement one policy change tomorrow to accelerate equity in cannabis, what would it be and why?
Ooh. So I guess it would depend on which state, right? But if I had to choose one to go across all states, it would probably be to lower the barriers to entry in the first place and make it that the only policy that we're going to look at is safety of the product, and what the end product looks like in that way. I get it. I'm talking a little tongue in cheek here because I get you can't just like squeeze the toothpaste is already out of the tube in some places, and we're not going back in that direction. But in a perfect world, I would love to see, look, make it so that if the product passes the test, it's all good to go. And that would allow so many people to be able to participate in this industry that maybe can't always meet the rigors of what it looks like in such a regulated space. I don't personally think that it's necessary to regulate this plant in that manner. I think that, it's a little overburdensome. I do think that product safety is important, especially because we don't have like data and science due to all the prohibition for all these decades. on the plant. So there are some things that we don't know, like some of these synthetic cannabinoids that are being created. We just don't know what they're going to be like down the line. I think that when we look at semi-synthetics, which are more similar to like, your vitamins and things like that, I think that, I think we got to not make sure we don't go back into a prohibition type of state around that and maybe do some more exploration and allow the door open to see what those things are like. And then of course, adulterants, chemicals, things like that, we want to make sure aren't in the products that people are consuming. But aside from that, that would be my magic wand if we were to say, okay, let's make this more equitable. We look at Oklahoma where there was very low barriers to entry. And, granted, it didn't work in some ways as an experiment, but in other ways, it was one of the most diverse and equitable states in the entire country. And so, I think the proof is in the pudding when you lower the barriers to entry and you allow for people in a capitalist society where it's supposed to be more of a free market, to be able to, compete with one another on more of a level playing field. So that's what I would do. I would say wave the magic wand and say that the only thing that exists now is product testing. And then if we want to build from there, build it out from there. But that should be the starting point. Like I said, I'm saying this a little tongue in cheek. I know that there's folks that are listening and this isn't by any means the official statement of MCBA. It's my personal take on a Friday afternoon.
No, and it matters. It's people have to understand the complexity of the issues, and you've done an excellent job of explaining that. Next up will be Councilmember Mike Davis. Councilmember.
Yeah, so with the federal form discussions gaining traction, what's your take on how veterans and minority-owned businesses can ensure they're not left behind when legalization eventually happens?
So again, a lot of different ways to go with this question. One thing I think I would say for sure is that we need to work together. I think that, veterans in this country have created in a lot of different spaces, a lot of great networks. And minority groups in this country have also done the same thing. And there's a lot of intersection also with minorities and veterans. A lot of veterans are minorities and vice versa, right? So I think that there's of course the policy things we can look at and look at social equity definitions and all that kind of stuff. But I think that the biggest thing is just making sure that we're talking with each other, like having conversations like this again, right? And communicating with one another and finding where the intersectionalities are, like making it so that, okay, like for us, for example, on our MCBA board, we have several veterans that have served on the board. Veterans Actions Council, right? Like I would say, to you guys, like where, is your board diverse also? If you have the diversity built into your board, then we have that intersectionality as well, right? So if we collaborate, we work together, if we have, that kind of open lines of communication, that's where I think the magic happens. I'm a really big fan. Like the reason I do the workshops is I believe you get the right people in the room and good stuff happens. And so, it has to be about collaboration again. That's what I would say. To how do we make sure that we don't all get left behind? Well, let's all work together so that we don't get left behind.
Yes, either we hang together or we hang separately, right?
Right.
All right. Next up will be Councilmember Tony Landry.
Excuse me. Yeah. My next question talks about collaboration. And we're doing some collaborating in Lafayette here. I started a mushroom growing group in the community, and we're going to talk to chefs and see if, they'll come in and do a cooking demo. So maybe some of the growers might start their own mushroom business or something, or even just supply local restaurants. So my question is, you've spoken often about the power of collaboration. How can veteran advocates and minority-owned business cannabis operators work together more effectively to drive change?
So, piggybacking off the last question too here, right? Just going further into that is, first step is, like I just said, getting together, talking, right? The next step is, okay, like, you know, and I appreciate this question because I even like sometimes I've expressed disgust around the word collaboration because I feel people use it so much nowadays, and I hear a lot of people use it, and then literally I watch those people turn around and gatekeep, and do the exact opposite and make it so that others can't collaborate, right? And so they only get to collaborate with the person they wanted to collaborate with, who was the star they wanted to be next to. But they talked about collaboration, and so it had all the nice buzzwords. And so I think that, you know, as much frustrated as I get with that concept, I still believe 100% that true collaboration is the way that we have to move forward. And the way to do that, in my opinion, is starting small. I think sometimes in cannabis, we think way too big a lot of the times. We go all the way to this massive vision and massive idea that we have, and we want to be business partners around this, and we want to create some kind of big, massive deal around this stuff. And I love the idea of thinking big, but there has to be a pathway there that we have to identify. Again, this is where SMART goals come in, right? Being specific and measurable about that thing, making sure it's attainable. And, you create a series of SMART goals that are like dominoes. And so basically you start with, okay, what's a small thing that we can do? If we want to collaborate, what's a small thing that we can both say yes to, that we can both commit to, and that we can both follow through on? And when you do that, you then get to see how each other work. And you get and there's two things that need to happen at that point. You either, have a situation where it doesn't work out, or sorry, there's a few different things. That you have the situation where it works out, great. Keep moving forward. Go on to the next big thing, right? Sometimes then you can jump into the big thing because you're like, no, we're totally in line, we're good. Other times you're gonna have it not work out. And when it doesn't work out, I think there's a couple different directions things can go in. One is it didn't work out because you're not the right fit to work with each other. The other thing is a possibility that I think people often forget about is that you maybe just weren't in the right seats in how you were trying to configure that. You guys were trying to force something that wasn't there, but it's not that you guys aren't the right fit. So back up, have a conversation, see what went right, what went wrong, and then decide if you still want to move forward or not, and whether you're the right fit or not for each other. We don't have time to waste, but at the same time, if you're already putting that time in the first place, I'm a big believer in evaluating. Now, look, if somebody just completely drops the ball on you, no, that's a big red flag and just kind of keep going. But I think that, again, I go back to we need to have grace with each other in the space that we're in. Things don't always work out right away. Sometimes it takes a minute for somebody to get back to you while they're trying to build their three businesses and, run the one that's working and take care of their family and deal with all their health issues that they're having as well, right? Like people are people. It doesn't mean we make excuses, but it means we recognize that, look, like just because somebody doesn't like follow through on getting back to you on an email tonight, but they do it tomorrow doesn't mean that they're like, written off, So that's my answer to that is how do we collaborate? How do we create that? Like, what's the importance is start small, identify small things, create a pathway to where you're really trying to get to, and don't just go into this idea where we have this big idea, we don't have no idea how we're going to get there. And then all of a sudden, next thing we know, we're doing some crazy stuff together to try to get here. But what was the reason? What was the point? What was the actual SMART goal here that got us to the bigger goal? So you have to be intentional as hell when it comes to collaboration. It's not easy. It takes time. It takes thought. It takes checking and going back and forth. But in the end, I think that it's worth it.
Thank you, Mike. I think so too.
Yeah, deep communication is key, and I don't know why people have that disconnect, Mike, but I've seen it myself many times over the decades, as well as you see when the lights come on, when the money hits home for people, and oh boy, can that change quite a few perspectives quickly. Next up will be Council Member Michael Crowitz. Council Member.
Thanks, ATN. So I guess this is sort of a carry-on question in a way from that, but drawing from everything that you've learned, a couple of decades in and around the industry, what personal lessons have you learned about resilience and purpose that you'd share with younger advocates entering the space today?
It's a great question. Um, I think the thing that I would say is have a big vision, right? And check in with that big vision and that mission and how you're going to get there on a daily basis. My business partner, Vernon Speller, with my company Dao Mastery, not with MCBA, is he checks in with his mission literally every single day. I think he states it multiple times a day throughout the day at different times, right? And the because the thing is that the world is going to keep kicking you. It's going to keep punching you. It's going to keep doing things to you, right? Like there's no shortage of where the attacks are coming from at the end of the day, right? Especially in today's world with social media and the rapidity of everything, whether it's a personal attack, whether it's a public thing, whether it's something that's like just, attack on the community, right? Like, here in in Minnesota, there was a couple of shootings this week. It really it rattled people, you know. The attacks are not going away anytime soon, whether regardless of what type they are. Like sometimes it's just within your own family, even, right? The attacks are going to come, right? You're going to have people doubt you. You're going to have people, whatever it may be, you know, financial, whatever it is. And, you know, the resilience piece, it's hard when it's just like you're just trying to hold your teeth and just grit it and say, I'm just going to get through this. Sometimes that's all you have. But I think it's a lot, I don't know if easier is the right word, but it's more, it facilitates it, which I guess is about making it easier when you have a clear vision and you have a clear mission and you can continually state it to yourself and know that this is what you're getting towards, your why, right? One of the things we open up the workshop tours with sometimes is we always open up with a few minutes of like taking some breath and maybe some guided meditation. And one of the things that I often ask everybody to do is to focus on your why today. Why did you get up today here? Why are you here on a Tuesday afternoon all day long, right? Why are you here on a Saturday morning? And that's the focus. And that when we can focus on the why we're doing something, and what that bigger vision is, our purpose. I don't know if it's easy to be resilient in that case, but at least resilience is you know, it's easier, I guess I would say. So yeah.
Right on. Next up will be Councilmember Nate Landau.
Looks like 9 and 10 are the same question. All right. All right. My question is, what excites you the most about the future of cannabis, and what role do you see the next generation of leaders playing in shaping that future?
So what excites me is again that vision, that potential, right? I do think that cannabis has the ability to create a new paradigm, as long as we are intentional about creating that new paradigm, right? Um, what excites me is, you know, is seeing people that have, you know, this plant has been stigmatized for a long time, and a lot of people have been punished in immeasurable ways because of that stigmatization. And I think one of the things that I'm excited to see is when folks that have been impacted so disproportionately and negatively be able to take this and turn it into something positive. And not just something positive, but something extremely positive and accelerate the growth of them, their family, and their community, right? Um, we had a very inspiring speaker at our Green Equity event the other day, Matthew Robinson. You know, served time, a good deal of time, and now is has you know multiple dispensaries and is inspiring lots and lots of people. He inspired the entire room that day, and every time he talks, I mean, he inspires everybody in that room. And so when you see a leader like this, that's extremely inspiring and exciting to see, right? You know, Matt is, you know, he's not, I mean, he's young, but he's not like a young, you know, the next generation by any means, right? But if people like Matt are able to inspire, you know, this next generation, and this next generation is able to come up in an era when hopefully prohibition goes away, um, then you know, we could see a lot of transformation and a lot more opportunity created and a lot more communities that are, you know, we talk about repairing communities. I mean, it's more than just repairing though, right? It's creating healthy and thriving communities that have been ravaged by this war on drugs. So, you know, as far as what I would see, you know, what role do I see the next generation of leaders playing? I think that as we look around, we see this Gen Z, millennials, you know, being more conscious and conscientious about the world that they're creating. I think that people are making more choices about where they want to work and spend their time, where they want to spend their dollars. And you know, the leaders that are coming out of that, they need us to be able to help provide that runway for them to be able to take on leadership in ways that can transform. I don't know if our current generation is the transformation generation. I think this next one, though, that's coming through is the one that's really going to transform things because of the paving of the way that this generation and the one before kind of did when it comes to, you know, ending this aspect of prohibition, right? Because we're still in prohibition right now. But I'm hoping that this next generation is able to be in a space where prohibition doesn't exist anymore and they're able to transform it into something amazing.
Well, thanks to leaders like you, that becomes more of a possibility every single day. So,
Thank you.
no, thank you. On behalf of everybody here, I'd like to thank our council members, Mike Davis, Tony Landry, Michael Crowitz, Nate Landau, Marilyn Mathry, and myself, Etienne Fontan. Mike, on behalf of the Veterans Action Council and everybody tuning in tonight, thank you for joining us and sharing your time and insight. Is there anything that you have that you would like to promote or share with everybody, especially social media, how to get hold of you, or how to find out more about the Minority Cannabis Business Association?
Yeah, sure. Excuse me. Minority Cannabis Business Association. You can find us on LinkedIn by searching for that. Our Instagram, you can find through our website is probably the easier way to find it. It's minoritycannabis.org. So if you just go to minoritycannabis.org, you'll be able to find all those links there. Me personally, it's my name, Mike Lomuto. I'm the same on Instagram as I am on LinkedIn. I post on LinkedIn, relatively regularly. And Instagram, I'm starting to. So those are ways to get a hold of me. As far as promoting what we're promoting right now, I mean, of course, always like looking to sign members on to the organization, right? If you're a small business in cannabis and you're a minority, we would definitely love for you to be a part of it. Or if you want to be supportive of minorities being in the space, you're absolutely welcome as well. So definitely that. And then also our equity workshop tour. We have a stop coming up in St. Louis in a couple weeks, September 10th, I want to say. Chicago is October 4th. We have our East Coast regional event, first ever regional 2-day event in Jersey City on November 7th and 8th. A few days after that, we'll be plugging in, I believe, with the Indigenous Cannabis Industry Association's policy summit there. I think the 12th, 13th, 11th, 12th, and 13th in Washington, D.C. of November. And yeah, and you can find our events on eventhigh.io. So yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate this, you guys. I look forward to collaborating more with the Action Council here and paving the way forward together.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your passion for building an equitable cannabis industry. Your dedication to creating opportunities and fostering inclusion is something that not just inspires the veteran community, but the entire movement as a whole. So thank you for that. We're grateful for your leadership and for helping guide this important conversation. So thank you for being with us tonight. And so, everybody, that has been our VAC Roundtable number 92 with Mike Lomuto from the Minority Cannabis Business Association. So, thank you, everybody. We'll be back in 2 weeks with Sabrina Fendrick. So, thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your night and evening.